to Bear Lifestyle, the podcast where we talk about taboo topics to make them normal and acceptable. I'm your host, Simona Spark, and I'm so happy that you are here. We are about to get naked by stripping away insecurities, judgments, and all kinds of limitations to reveal the essence of who we really are Bear. Bold, authentic, radical, express. Let's go.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Welcome.
Happy, what day is it? Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday to you too. Neal, can you tell me a little bit about you?
Yeah, happy to do so. So I'm kind of I think when I saw your post, I was like, oh, I'm actually exactly what this woman is looking for. Because I'm kind of like, I like to say I'm a little bit of a mixed bag.
Hmm.
Because I think it's really interesting. I am a pretty successful, let's call it business professional person who's worked in corporate America and stuff like that. And then I kind of stepped out of that space, and have done all the things, right? Plant medicine, men's work, retreat weekends, sound bowls, all the things. But then I laugh sometimes because I'm strangely confused about how when people go off and do this kind of personal development work, if you want to call it that, why they can't just like do both,
Hmm.
right? And suddenly everyone's got, a piercing and tattoos, and they're lighting sage, and they're like, I'm never going back to the workplace. And it's just like, I don't think that's realistic in the world we
Hmm.
live in. I think you can actually have more impact in the world by taking the lessons and things that you learn and then bringing them back into like these professional cultures. And so I've built this lifestyle over the past, dozen or so years of like, I coach a $500 million pipeline right now. And it's some of the biggest companies in the world: Spotify, Cintas, Bristol Myers Squibb, Bausch and Lomb, and a couple other ones. But I'm also the guy who shows up with a big beard, covered in tattoos, and it's interesting because I've built this kind of rapport over the past dozen or so years where, um, people I don't think have business problems. Because business is easy when you understand intimacy, you understand trust, you understand integrity, and like all these kind of words that are soft skills supposedly, but they're really hardcore drivers into like how people show up and are successful in their lives. And so there was a period in my life where I was very successful out in the world publicly, and my marriage was falling apart. My intimacy, I didn't understand intimacy. Most men don't understand intimacy other than sex. That's our only outlet for intimacy. So we don't understand internal family systems or attachment styles, or epigenetics, or traumatic situations. And so I went down this rabbit hole for a couple of years. And while I'm not accredited or licensed in any way for those topics, um, I'm extremely well versed in like how to like articulate and work through them. And then, as it relates directly to your podcast, there was a period in my life where, and I have a funny story about how I got into it actually, but for 12 months, um, you know, in a very weird, dark part of my own life, I was heavily involved in the BDSM community as kind of a pay for play actor in the space. And I have all kinds of fun stories and cool, interesting stories about that. But like, there is not one thing in the fetish book that I have not done a dozen times. And people would craft these crazy, intricate fantasy scenarios. And I think as a coach now, I think one of the most critical points in my coaching journey was really understanding guilt, shame, intimacy, and sex at a very, very deep level, and then understanding like how people demonstrate that in the real world. Like I joke around with people all the time. They'll be like, um, "I'm stuck. I'm uncomfortable. I can't sleep. I'm anxious. I'm nervous." And they come up with all these stories, and I'm literally like, "You got to get fucking laid more,
Mm.
right?" Because you don't realize like that we're so good at identifying the side effects of the things that we're not doing and then turning the side effect into a problem versus like the preventative maintenance aspect of it, to realize like sex is so important like in your life, and if you're not having it, then you're going to find other places to waste that vibration and frequency and energy. And that's how it kind of demonstrates itself, especially for men, because we don't have the relationships with our bodies that women do. And so therefore we don't, unless you actively go and investigate and find other ways for intimacy, um, you still got to do something with that. And then that turns into numbing it through porn, or numbing it through alcohol, or too much cannabis, or other venues.
Yeah.
So I've become like this huge advocate, like pro sex, pro psychedelics, pro internal work, but like do that stuff. But then like go be a badass, learn how to become wealthy, be a good parent, enjoy your fucking children. Like, don't just sit on a bench like, woe is me, you know, like a monk in a castle who now feels bad for the things they know about their life.
Phew. Okay. So we might do like a series with Neal.
I'm here for it. I'm here for it.
I love it. I love it. Well, I think we are in it. I thought like, hey, tell me a little bit about you before we push the record button. But recording is going, and this is it, and it's usually how I roll. Well, in it. Okay, so I love your approach very much. So, and I hear you. This personal journey of discovery, developing, well, healing. Because I noticed that, like, I'm in the space of coaching space for the past 6 years, right? And people want to grow and evolve and expand, and it's all beautiful. But what doesn't let you do that? Whatever happened to you in the past, or to your parents, or whatever, 7 generations before, right? So all this growing and expanding, it's about healing. And you said a lot of things. I'll need to go back to the recording and pull out, like, we're going to do like 17 different conversations just to what you share in 5 minutes, right? But just to look at the pieces that I relate with you and I resonate with your approach is with my clients, when you say they come with the surface explanations, right? Of I'm stuck or whatever, overwhelmed. For me, it's guilt, shame, and fear. What are you afraid of? What you feel guilty about? What are you ashamed of, right? And yeah, same here. Like in intimacy, that's the most vulnerable space to be, right? Especially with another person or other people, depends of the setting, right? There is no much space to hide when you're there, completely open, transparent, vulnerable. And what I got to learn, first of all, as a student of the work and then facilitating others to this space, is especially in BDSM lifestyle. I mean, the trust, it's fundamental, right?
Right.
Trust, it's fundamental. The connection, it's fundamental. You can't fake a connection. You can't fake the trust there. You can't fake the vulnerability. You can't fake the communication. I mean, the pillars, right? You can't fake them, as you might want to fake them in other spaces, because there is shame, guilt, and fear. So a lot get to be pulled out there, right? To heal, to release.
Right. Exactly. Well, but I also think like that road in itself is like, even the words you're using, as somebody who's been on the other side of it, been through it, and then now like there, unless you're drawn to that language, I think it's really interesting, especially for professionals, because and I laugh a lot at white men. I think it's really funny for white men, because like there was for decades, this kind of blueprint for, how white men become successful.
Mhm. The
And
steps, the
the,
steps,
the
right?
steps were always there, right? And
Mhm.
then, for women and people of color, the steps were not clearly outlined. And so now, while there's still some way to go, now that the steps are kind of becoming more equalized, there's this weird thing that goes on that, I always speak candidly and transparently. It's like that women and people of color are like, oh, now it's a fairer playing field, so to speak.
Mm.
But then sometimes in that mix, white professional men end up becoming like the villains of this, and yet they don't know or understand. And so sometimes what I find really, really interesting is like, an executive, and it doesn't have to be even a white man, but an executive who, you know, went to a good school, right? Went to a good college, right? Got the right certification, went and worked for the right company, becomes kind of indoctrinated or culturalized to, this is the way we do things here.
Mm-hmm.
And that becomes such a foundational stone in their identities, which is a big piece of what you're talking about when you talk about guilt or shame, right? Because you're feeling guilty or shameful about who you are.
Yeah.
That it's really interesting, because now, unless that's why I say, like, so many people don't have these really good personal development experiences or awakenings, or they have to like hit the rock bottom, right? They have to like lose their job, lose their partner, lose a family member before they suddenly kind of wake up. But I think a lot of people don't and then how that relates into BDSM is, then you have this kind of concept or idea that exploring certain feelings that you may have around trust, because really, like, healthy BDSM involves a ton of trust.
Trust trust and genuine connection. As I say, like, of course, I could only speak from my beliefs, right? It's like I don't think you could fake it. So it's interesting to see, like, if we go take the traditional, dom sub dynamic of like, how do you pass the power and how do you play with control? And it's like, who are you? Because of course it's identity work. Like, who are you outside of the dungeon? And who allowed you to be when in this space? And for me, it's always fascinating. It was for me personally, but also witnessing other people, like the pieces that we get to discover, they're there, dormant. And like, and that's so deep, right? Because we went through shit, as a woman, right? I'm a survivor of human trafficking. I mean, I don't know, probably somebody that went through the same thing could understand like the level of work that needed to be done to heal those parts, right? To trust myself again, to trust my body again, to trust pleasure again, right? But in the same time, I want to have understanding with the men. I mean, we still see the double standards because we see them, they're still there. And I'm the one to say the patriarchy didn't only hurt women, it also hurt men because there is pressure there, right?
Right.
So I like how you differentiate like of course we generalize here, like the white man and then the woman and men of color, or women and gay men, which we relate a lot with gay men, right? Is this impossible standards, expectation of beauty, not aging, no wrinkles, perfect bodies, and all kind of crazy shit, right? That it's put on us. And then in the end, it's like, now I'm self-traumatizing because I have this belief that I need to be forever young and forever fit. And when my body naturally is moving and shifting, now I self-traumatize.
Right.
I'm talking down to myself. I'm self-judging. Before anybody else judge me, I'm the one to do it first, right? So, of course, with all that, how do I take all that into a space when we talk BDSM lifestyle and just be completely open and honest and transparent? You can't unless you did some healing.
Right.
What is your take on that?
Well, I've encountered two sides of that, because I
Mm,
think there is, so when I went down my kind of rabbit hole of BDSM, it was more so than like just kind of finding some leather straps and, like, throwing them on a bed and seeing what happens.
mhm, mhm,
Um, I've read a lot of Carl Jung's work around it, and a lot of I could pull up a bunch of books on the psychology around it, and there really is probably about, I forget what the real number is, but just so I'll sound smart, it's like 75% of BDSM work, or BDSM investigation is actually like really the negative side of it, which is I've got
The
some guilt.
shadows.
I've got the shadows and I've got the guilt and shame, and the only way that I can get a release from it, and what you find also is, what you find when you get into the weeds of people who participate at that level, the deeper you go into it, the more extreme is, you either have a person who really has a hard time functioning in day-to-day life, and this becomes kind of an inroads into experiencing life in a different way. But then the other side of it is interesting, because you have high performer, very alpha, you know, strong D on the disc profile, people who CEOs who or ultra wealthy people, right, who basically can snap their fingers and people do things for them. And so a
Right.
lot of times you see that then those type of people go into the space because they don't need an inroads, they need an outlet,
Yes.
right?
Very well said.
And so it's really interesting, because like even now when I coach people who are operating in high performance environment, what we spend a lot of time on is actually creating a preventative maintenance plan, so that if you are going to have to spend 6 hours in this hardcore meeting, or making these high risk and reward
Decisions.
conversations, what
Mhm.
you have to realize is that inside every single human has this kind of pendulum that swings between the investment of emotions. And it's interesting because a lot of people will say things like, I'm not a good multitasker, or I am a good multitasker, or it's hard for me to switch from A to B, from parent to professional. It's hard for, and it's really not, because every time that I um, go through this conversation with people, it's not that you can't do one thing and then do another thing. It is the cost emotionally for the pendulum to swing over to the other side, right? And
Yes.
and so like somebody could watch a Marvel movie. This is the example I give people. You could watch a Marvel movie with Wolverine and the Avengers and all these people in it. You could watch an hour of it, turn it off, and then put the Transformers on and pick up that movie. Or you could watch half of the movie and then watch the other half tomorrow and pick up exactly where you left off, because the pendulum swing comes across differently than, what ends up having to happen is people who swing the pendulum into this like high performance space, and it's kind of this work hard play hard mentality, and when they don't have the right internal systems in place, somatics and stuff like that, they have to swing back to something where like going fishing is just not good enough for them, and so they go into these deep dark spaces.
Right, right. And I like your metaphor with the pendulum, and I believe that all that finding that emotional balance, it's internally, because and we see that. I know I've been doing that, and maybe I still do without even knowing. It's like we are very focused externally to like, oh, I work this, I should take a break. Oh, I have like 7 meetings now, I'm gonna go for a walk. But it's like, yeah, but how do I feel? Because it's not about what I'm doing, it's about where my emotions are. Well, the pendulum goes, so it's like I'm all balanced. I'm grounded. I'm okay. The tendency, or the, maybe it's not tendency, what's the word here? Opinions is like, as high executive as you are, as extreme you might be in an intimate space. And that's just simply not true, right?
It's interesting because again, like everything else, right, there is a stigma.
Right. Absolutely. It's like, oh, can we just break them all? Like, that's my work here. Like, can we just break all the taboo? It's just at this point, I feel like it's a makeup concept for people that are uncomfortable to talk about some topics. Let's call them taboo and let's don't touch them. Um, that's the mission here in this space. Make all taboo topics acceptable and normal, right? And then stop stigmatize everything and box everything and label everything. I mean, I understand for the purpose of language, so we know what we are talking about. We have names and stuff, but can we just let go of wrong and right? Because who's to decide? What's wrong for you could be just perfect for me and vice versa.
Right. Well, I'll have to introduce you to, there's a woman that I know who's a friend of mine who's in Australia, and she's got a background in professional dominatrix work. But
Wonderful.
but she now has kind of like an Airbnb business where basically these rooms are set up like classic dungeons, but they're
Oh,
not,
fun.
but they're not like black and red, like it's like white monotone,
Yeah.
like the crosses are healthy, are white, like all the toys are not like looking like this kind of dungeon demonic experience. Because I mean, like, one thing I've learned throughout this experience, you really do can, right, in the right scenario with the right person, like, there is so much that you can learn about yourself and how you trust yourself with others, that, and it's not about trusting the other person as much as like trusting yourself in the space
First, you have to
first.
trust yourself first.
Right. Like
Yes.
you can't be like, oh my God, I can't believe that that person did that to me. I mean, there's
Yeah.
obviously the dark side of this and the narcissism and the sadism of it and stuff like that, for sure. But you need to really take like radical acceptance of like, I created this scenario, right, with this person that's in front of me, and
Right.
I treated this right, and it's just it is and should be a complicated scenario that leads you to a positive experience through and through.
100%. Yes. And I like that you said that this space is not all whips and leather and violence, as
Right.
as majority of people will believe. So again, without enough inner work, enough healing, because it's not all healing all done. I don't know. We are never completely healed, I believe. Uh it's such a self-discovery process, really. Like even a dating space, like, as I went to date and experience life and date differently than I used to, in my 20s. uh Immediately I get to discover that it's not I'm just discover other people and learn about other people. Every single date taught me something about me. So it's such a self-discovery process. People, in their 40, 50s and such is like, oh, I don't want to go back into the dating. I don't want to, whatever. Now it's hard. I'm divorced. I'm whatever. And it's like, well, that was the most fun, especially if you know who you are and what you want. And you get to discover so much more. So dungeon or not, I mean, just dungeon for the heck of it. I love that term, like I really do. But again, it gets to be peaceful and it gets to be white and it gets to be pink and it like pink and white. And it gets to be essential and it gets to do whatever the hell you want it to be, right?
Right, exactly. And again, I think a big piece of it is the stigma around it, right?
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I've built kind of my coaching practice off of, and again, I think it's one of the core areas, is like, I think there's this stigma, of course it ties into religion a little bit, um
Mhm.
of like, it's not okay, to have these urges, so to speak.
Yeah.
But like, I really do believe that part of the human experience is that we do have these kind of primal, urges of, to explore. And then obviously it's going to show up for itself in different ways with different people.
Right.
versus like one of the things I think is really, really interesting that I gleaned from some of the work I've done in the past is like when it gets to men, and sometimes I talk about the men more just because it's easier than like because I am one versus like, this is why women like have daddy issues, like,
Mm.
um, but
And sometimes that could be just the most amazing thing that could happen to you.
right, right. And
I,
then
I like to explore, sorry to interrupt, like all those things like stigmas and stereotypes and whatnot, and to say, actually they get to be the gift, and whatever happened to you or for you or before you get into that space and fears, actually they get to be transformed into very powerful experiences. Like I give this example before. Once upon a time, I was in a space where I was like tied down and raped by multiple men, and it took what it took to heal that part. But when I put myself into situation, into just a bondage play, to say, I actually ask for it. I actually tell my partner how to be done, where the rope need to go, how tight, how loose. There is a level of power that you don't get to experience in other space.
right,
And instead of being done to you, you ask for it. But not only that, you get to draw pleasure out of it. So it's transmuting that deep, deep, deep trauma into ecstasy, really.
right. Well, radical acceptance is a very powerful thing.
Mm,
I think it's such a powerful thing where uh, like I bring a lot of this work into business work as well.
hmm
Like even like I do some sales coaching, and I coach like a lot of sales teams, the resistance that they experience right throughout the sale. And
hmm
one of the biggest things I think I've ever learned is, if you can really take radical accept, like you can't control a person, right? But what you can do is control the behavior of your entire conversation.
mm.
And
Your
so,
your part, at least, your contribution to it, right?
no, you can control the whole entire conversation.
Mm.
So,
Tell
so,
me more.
so so I'll do it like, and it becomes a conscious thing, right? The other piece of it I think is like there are ways to ethically manipulate outcomes. And I think
Mm.
that there are people who will use,
Ethically manipulate. I love that.
as a salesperson, right? You
Mm.
can ethically manipulate the conversation.
Yeah, I get it. I mean, I've been in sales all my life. It's one thing to just force to push something, and it's another thing to actually listen, active listening, and it come with a solution to your client to meet their needs.
Like, for example, no matter who is selling anything, there
Mm-hmm.
are only three reasons, maybe four, why they wouldn't buy your thing. Number one, they don't fully understand it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, they can't afford it. Number three, they don't have the time for it. And number four, they don't have the focus for it.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can really like embody those as the only four things why the person wouldn't buy the thing, then it becomes a matter of you buy into the behavior of that conversation, because the behavior is, I want to resolve all those things before you could ever get them in your head.
Right.
So then it
Right.
becomes about controlling the behavior of that conversation. Because if it's like, well, here, let me tell you about my coaching business, and let me tell you that I help people gain momentum in their lives so that they can have more freedom, so that they can have more impact on the world. The way that we do that is through a series of frameworks and structures that make sure that they wake up every day having more energy, more focus, more clarity, because when you have more focus and more clarity in your life, you'll get more momentum. Then you have better control over your life because you'll be making more money and you get more freedom. The way that we do that is through time productivity tools, understanding the full system in your business. And then when you have more money, you kind of have the value of blah, 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 blah into impact in your life. And if I was pitching you hard, I would then say that like I've already answered all of those questions. And then it becomes a matter of like, doesn't that sound great to you? Like, what would that feel like for you to be on the other side of that and
Right.
have momentum in your day every day, more freedom in your time, and you can have more impact in your life? And we make it cost effective. We make it so that the calls are recorded, so you can listen to them on your own time. We make it so that your system's in place, so you can be focused, and you're actually controlling the behavior of what that person could actually say back to you because
Right.
you know it so intimately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's, painting what they want better than they could express it, to say, oh God, yeah, get out of my brain, right? It's exactly what I want. And so it goes into the dungeons with the right person, right?
All right.
I'm gonna try to close this here for now. Before we go into the closing, like where will be the right place for people to follow you, to find you if they want more of you? And we will put all that in the description, but just where do you invite people in your
Yeah.
space?
So I write articles weekly on Substack. You can look up Neal Colon and you'll see my weekly articles there. I post daily on Instagram. And then I have a website, www.nealcolon.com.
Fantastic. And I will put all that information like beautifully linked in the description of this episode so people could just click and land into your space. So how do we close this, Neal? What do you want to say in closing?
I think what's interesting about this I think the biggest thing for me that I think is I think people have weird relationships with intimacy because they learn that level of intimacy from the examples that we're giving to them, both good or bad examples.
Right.
And so I could not believe when I was failing at relationships over and over again, what I realized was it was the lack of ways to express intimacy that I did not have. And when I was able to go through a course on intimacy and understand a little bit more about attachment styles and learn how to integrate those things into my life, that it really did change the relationship that I had with all kinds of things. And I very strongly urge anybody that ever listens to a podcast about this type of topic, like go and explore it, get uncomfortable with it, and realize it'll open up amazing things for you.
Amen to that. I love that we closed it when we started, right? Intimacy is not sex. Everybody could have sex, but not everybody is capable to be intimate with another human. So, all right. Well, we close it here. Thank you for your time, for your wisdom. I have zillions of questions, so we need to bring you back.
Yeah, let's do it again soon.
And this is where we landed. Thank you so much for tuning in today. And if you enjoyed the show, make sure you leave me a review to let me know. For more bear experiences, please go to simonaspark.com/bear and follow us on Instagram at simonasparkworld. I can't wait to have you back. Until then, be bear, bold, authentic, radical, expressed. See you next time.